Hi, so in this video tutorial I'm going to go through the process of animating a character in Maya walking up a ladder. So obviously you could use a Max rig, you could do this in 3ds Max, but I'm going to cover this again in Maya. And the first thing I'm going to do is get some video reference, and this is massively important. If you don't get reference, you're going to find it really hard to produce something that's believable. So here I've found a video of a couple of guys climbing a ladder. I've just stuck the YouTube address in one of these YouTube looping websites, and this is great reference. So I can just narrow down the exact part of the clip I want to view, which is 8 seconds 14 to 8 seconds 21 on here, and it will just constantly loop this. So if you're working with two monitors, you can stick this on the second screen, and you'll find it really useful. Okay, so over in Maya, what I've done is I've created a very simple ground plane, and I've modeled a ladder as well. Now you could model this in 3ds Max, so you could do any kind of environment modeling in 3ds Max and just send it over to Maya. So remember, you've got under File in the menu bar, you've got the Send to 3ds Max option, and in 3ds Max you've got the opposite, so you've got the Send to Maya option. So that is a possibility. Just to quickly show you how I did this in Maya itself, it was very simple. I just used some primitive options up here in the poly modeling shelf. So I used the cylinder option just up here, third one along. That creates a cylinder, and then using the move tool, you can just position that into place. I used the scale tool. I did a non-uniform scale to stretch the cylinder up, and I duplicated this. So you can press Control D on the keyboard to duplicate objects. You can also see that option up here in the menu bar if you go to Edit and then Duplicate. So with one side of the ladder complete, I just pressed Control D to create a copy like that. I then created another copy which I rotated 90 degrees on its side. And to get an exact 90 degrees, I can just come over here in the channel box. So this option here, top right of Maya, and I just came over here and took the rotate value and just put a nice -90 in there just to straighten that up. Then it was just a case of doing a uniform scale and a non-uniform scale, and actually just to get a proper non-uniform scale, I'll probably want to do this, so squash it down like that, and yeah, just move that into position. So of course you can customize that however you like. What I then did is with this rung selected, the bottom rung, I went back to Edit, Duplicate, but I selected Duplicate Special, went into the options for the tool, and I did something like this. So I put the Translate Y option to 2, and I put the number of copies to 8, and then I simply clicked Apply to duplicate those up. Now it was trial and error, so I mean these look really close together, so you could try a distance of 3, for example, maybe bring the copies down to 5 and click Apply again, undo, maybe change that distance to 2, copies to 4, apply, and you can try again. Oops, 4 even. Let's put the distance up maybe to 6. Yeah, so you get the idea. So once I had something vaguely ladder-like, what I then did is I grouped the objects. So I can select the multiple objects, or I can hold down Shift to add to a selection. So I basically selected all the objects on that make up the ladder, and then went to Edit and went to Group, or Control G on the keyboard. Now that these are grouped, what I then did is I selected the group over here on the list on the left hand side. So this is called Group 5 for this ladder. And I then pressed Insert on the keyboard, and this allowed me to move my pivot point into position. So basically I did something like this. Position the pivot point down at the base of the object and just to one side. If I press Insert again, I can exit the pivot mode, and then I just went to my Rotate tool and simply rotated the ladder forward a bit. So really simple stuff. And just to add, the ground plane object here is simply one of these objects. So it's a polygon disk, again in the poly modeling shelf. So that's pretty much it when it comes to the environment. Obviously, for your environment, you might want something completely different. I'm just trying to keep this simple to begin with. So this is the rig from Blackboard. So this has got the IK/FK sliders, and we can see that, yeah, we've got that problem with the ARM FK/IK slider, and this just needs to be pushed all the way to FK just to avoid any issues when you're working with the rig. I really need to update that and resave the file. Yeah, apart from that, it's the rig from Blackboard. There's no animation on here yet, and we're ready to go. So what I'm going to do is, the first thing I need to do is bring up the IK controllers for the arms. So at the moment these arms are using FK controllers. So basically I can rotate the limbs, and I can rotate the hand, and essentially if I move the pelvis, the arms and the hands move with the character. Unlike the legs, where the feet are planted on the ground, they're constrained in space. So the legs are using IK, they're constrained in space, but the arms are using FK. Now, with a walk, FK for the arms makes a lot of sense because they tend to move with the body, and they tend not to be constrained to anything. But with a climb, where you're using your hands, you need to use IK for the hands as well as the feet. So if you imagine we want the hands to grab the rungs on the ladder, what we want to happen is when we move the pelvis, we want the hands to stay in place. So what I'm going to do now is just enable the IK controls for the hands. And to do that, I need to select this eye icon just down here within the big circle. And over here in the outliner, we can see just in the top right that the IK arm left and right IK arm controllers, they're currently turned off. So all I need to do is turn those on. And if I just zoom out a tiny bit, you'll see what happens. We get this big blue shaded shape when I turn on the L IK arm. If I now turn on the R IK arm, we'll see something similar. We've got a big red shape now for that hand controller. So yeah, essentially these big shaded shapes, these are your IK controllers. And when the arms are using IK, they'll follow these shapes. And of course, using these sliders, you can go between the two modes. So you can go between FK and IK. Currently, we are in FK mode, so moving this makes no difference to the rig. But if I change the slider to IK, the hand would then follow this controller. And this controller would act like a constraint. So if I move the body independently of the arm, then the hand would be constrained in space. So I think what I'm going to do, just to simplify this, is get one foot on the ladder and one hand on the ladder. So I'm going to go with the posing limbs. So I'm going to grab this blue foot controller here, and I've not keyframed anything yet. I've got auto key on down here, but I'm yet to actually keyframe anything. And I'm just going to move this foot onto the first rung. Now the first thing you'll notice is the knee pops, and the reason for that is the knee look-at controllers. These controllers here are very close to the character, and they're very low down as well. So the knee's trying to look at these controllers, hence why this knee is flipped now. So what I'm going to do before I carry on is grab both of these knee controllers, and I'm just going to shift them over here. So I'm going to put them fairly high, maybe up here and all the way over here. So in this position, they shouldn't really cause any problems. The knees will always look at them, and they're far enough away and high enough away that yeah, it should sort out the legs. So you can see this knee is back to normal now, and we're good to go. So I'm going to get this foot on this rung, and you'll see that the arms have raised up. And I'm going to take this controller here, this IK hand controller, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the arm slider, which is this one here, and I'm going to shift it all the way over to IK. And as I do that, you'll see it tweens from the FK mode, which is aligned to the FK controllers. It tweens it into that IK controller. So now I can grab the IK controller and I can reposition it, and I'm now controlling the arm. So if I rotate it, about roughly 90 degrees and move it, I should be able to get something like this. So I should be able to get that on the ladder, and as if it's holding the ladder. And I might put a tiny bit of rotation on it, so it's more like 45 or 40 degrees up in the air. So something like this. So I'm still not animating the character, I'm just moving this into position. The next thing I'll do is grab this controller here, just over the knuckles, and I'll take the curl value and I'll put that to 0.5. And that's just going to give me a nice grabbing pose. And from here I'm just going to grab the IK controller again and just shift that into position. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect, I guess. It depends how close your camera is, but yeah, something like that is going to be fine to begin with. So that's a curl value of 0.5, and I've just moved and rotated the IK control into position. And what I think I'll do with the other arm is simply rotate it, because the other arm's still using FK. So I'm just going to rotate that down by the character's side and try and make that fairly natural. So I could grab the curl value, and actually I could put 0.1 in there just to make that a tiny bit more natural. And maybe give it a tiny bit of bend in the forearm and just pull that back a tiny bit. So yeah, I think this is a good first pose. I might just rotate the head controller up a tiny bit, maybe grab the eye look at controller and move it up. So we're showing that the character is looking up, he's preparing to climb the ladder. He's not just a zombie staring straight ahead. A couple of other tweaks we could do. This elbow controller here, we could move this down a tiny bit, just relax that arm a tiny bit. And of course you've got the opposite arm controller here. Remember, this won't do anything yet because we're still using FK on this arm. Once you're happy with your first pose, what I tend to do is just kind of grab everything, big marquee, and press S on the keyboard. So that's going to manually set a key for everything. The next thing I'm going to do is try and block this out now. So I'm just going to keep this simple. I'm going to work on increments of 10. So I'm going to go to frame 10 now. I'm going to grab this foot, this other foot. So this is the foot that's on the ground. Now I pressed S with the time slider on on frame 1. So that when I now move this up, it will be a tween. So when I move this foot up on frame 10, it will tween from the ground to the second rung. And if you don't do that, if you forget to keyframe everything on frame 1, then you'll have problems. You basically won't be animating. So don't forget, I've got auto key on. So when I move the foot up now, oops, because I've already keyframed it on 1, you'll see a keyframe is set now on frame 10. So I'm going to just move that into position. So that foot's going to go up. Ignore the fact that the leg looks really strange. And grab the pelvis controller, and push that up too. And we also want to push that forward a tiny bit. So you want something, I guess, something like this. And once you've done that, so once you've got the right foot onto the second rung, and you've moved the pelvis up, the other thing you need to do is now get this left hand into position on the fourth rung up. So to do this, what you don't want to do is use FK, because it's not going to constrain. If I move the pelvis, you'll notice that the right hand doesn't move. So at this stage we need to use IK for this left arm. So very simple, all I need to do is come down here, take the arm slider and drag that to IK. So what I'm doing here is actually tweening from FK to IK over 10 frames. Whereas with the other arm, I set this to IK on frame 0, so that was simply just changing the mode on frame 0. So it's slightly different what I'm doing here. And you'll see that what happens is we go from that tween from FK to IK now. So 0, we're in the FK position. Frame 10, we're now in the IK position. And the IK position is here because the IK controller is here. So now I just need to take this IK controller now and keyframe this too. And just like with the other arm, it's just a case of moving that into position, rotating it roughly 90 degrees, rotating it about 40 degrees, and moving that into position. Once I'm happy with the position of the hand there, I'll then grab the knuckle controls and put the curl value to 0.5. So that's the same value I used for the other hand. And yeah, again, that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. So from here, it's just a case of really just keep going with this. Yeah, so that's my animation. So it's tempting to add all the detail in at this stage, but you'll find it easier if you just kind of block things in and then go back and add the detail. So I'm just going to change the end time on my timeline. So it's currently 24, which is a second of animation. I'm just going to put this to 40. So I'm going to animate 40 frames in total. So working on increments of 10 frames. So 10 for the first step. I'm now going to go to frame 20. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to go back to 10. I'm going to select everything and press S again. Because, for example, this foot here, it didn't move. And actually it hasn't been keyframed. So let's just try that again. Select everything, S. That worked that time. I'm not sure why that is in Maya, but sometimes when you select everything, it doesn't actually necessarily keyframe everything. So I just did that again, and really what I'm trying to make sure is that this foot here, which doesn't actually move between 0 and 10, holds. So we need to keyframe it on frame 10, so that when we go to frame 20, we don't get strange tweening going on. Same with the pelvis, just double check you've keyframed that on frame 10 too. Okay, let's keep going. So on frame 20 now, it's just a case, it's a bit like a walk cycle this. It's a case of taking the bottom foot, dragging it up onto that third rung, pushing it forwards, and that's it. Grabbing the pelvis, and that's going to go up and forwards, so something like that. Try and keep a bit of bend in that foot that's back. And then it's a case of just grabbing this hand controller here, this IK controller, and putting it on that rung up there. And yeah, that's pretty much for now. That's pretty much fine. So I'm going to select everything again, press S, just double check. Yeah, that's worked. I'm going to go to frame 30 now. I'm going to take this foot and move it up. So you're always taking the lowest foot and the lowest arm. I'm now going to grab the pelvis, pull that up, keep a bit of bend even in that leg that's down, and then finally the hand, moving that into position. Selecting everything and keyframing. So you can see how quick this is now. Once you get a rhythm going, it's really quick. So I'm now on frame 40 already, so this is the final frame. I'm going to move that foot up, move the pelvis up, keep a bit of bend in that leg, grab the hand controller and pull that up. So yeah, I'm starting to speed up in Maya. I'm obviously not a Maya animator, but it's amazing how quickly you get the hang of it if you've animated before. So I'm just going to select everything, press S, and then hopefully if I just do Alt V to play this back, yeah, it's going to be okay. So I mean, it's not going to win any awards, but this is a nice block out, and we can move on from here. Remember, you can hide your controllers over here in the bottom right section in the outliner. So if you press V, and V for right controls, mid controls, and left controls, we can quickly preview this without any controls getting in the way. So this is a good starting point, and you know the timing's consistent, and we've got the character moving. I'm just going to make these visible again. What we need to do next is start looking at in-betweens. So an in-between, for example, could be adding some weight shift on the pelvis. So what I could do is I could say, right, this pelvis control here, the one with the arrows, the purple controller, is currently being keyframed on 1, 10, 20, 30, and 40. And that's because I've always selected everything on those frames and pressed S. So even though I haven't animated this yet, we've already got keys laid out. And what I could do is start adding weight shift on the in-between. So for example, I could say on frame 5, all the weight is on his blue foot. So let's just shift his pelvis over onto that foot. On 15, it's the other foot. So I'm going to shift it to the red foot. On 25, it's back onto the blue foot. And on 35, it's back onto the red foot. So if I play that back, now we've got I mean, it looks quite feminine, but we've got some really nice weight shift as this character walks up the ladder. One thing that I noticed when I add this weight shift is that the feet look a bit too far apart. So what we could do now is look at how to bring those feet together without affecting the rest of the animation. What I don't want to do is to have to do this on frame 1, 10, 20, 30 and 40. It's a bit tedious. So instead I'm going to go to the Windows, in the menu bar I'm going to go to Animation Editors and the Graph Editor. And all I need to do is find the Translate X option, grab all of these keys and use the middle mouse button just to manipulate these keys. So if I drag these down, I'm pushing this foot to the right. If I grab the other foot, select Translate X, I can do the same thing. So I can grab all these keys and shift those to the left. So I'm pushing these keys up. So if I play this back, the feet are closer together now and it just feels a bit nicer. I could probably make this a bit more accurate as well. So I could actually put this to 0.17, let's say. So if I do 0.17 for that foot, then this foot here would be minus 0.17. So if you want to keep that even and neat, that's a good way to do it. So I'm happy with the feet closer together. It looks a lot better. So that's just one example of weight shift. Another example of shifting the weight and adding some nice in-betweens would be to grab the pelvis control itself. So this is the green circle around the pelvis. And what we could do here is maybe just every time the character goes up on these in-betweens, so 5, 15, 25 and 35, just kind of push the pelvis out a tiny bit. So on 5, I'm just going to push it away from the ladder. On 15, push it away. 25, push it away. And 35, push it away. So if I play this back, it just feels so much more weighty. It feels a lot more believable because the pelvis isn't just moving in a straight line anymore. And yeah, this straight away is helping. Another thing I could do is add some head bob. So I could grab the head controller and on the same in-betweens I could just rotate the head down a bit. So I could do something like this. So the head just bobs up and down as the character climbs the ladder. And if that's a bit too heavy, we could just look at taking this down a tiny bit. So I don't know, I could grab all these keys here and maybe put 0 in there just to kind of even that up a tiny bit. Yeah. Okay, so that's another in-between. We of course need in-betweens on the feet. So the other thing I could do is I could grab the feet and starting with this red foot, I could, for example, rotate it down on frame 5. Maybe on frame 8, I could rotate it up like this. Oops, and I could maybe pull it back a tiny bit. So it's stepping up and over onto the rung, not just sliding through it. So let's just try that on the blue foot. So 15, we're going to rotate down. 18, I'm going to rotate up and pull back. I can't pull back too much because of the proximity with the pelvis, but as much as I can. Same with this foot here. So yeah, it's an in-between, so I'm going to rotate it down. And on 28, I'm just going to rotate it up and pull it back. So the feet are big, the legs are short, so it doesn't make this easy. Same with this foot, so rotate down on the in-between. On 38, we rotate up and we pull back a bit. So if I play this back, this should make a big difference. Now it looks like the legs are actually stepping up. They're not just moving in a linear fashion from A to B, they're actually stepping up. And they could step out at the same time just to break this up from behind. So yeah, just stuff like that really. Another little touch I'm going to add, and this won't be an in-between, I'm just going to overwrite the existing keys here. But if I grab this purple arrow controller on the torso, I could do something like this. I could maybe rotate it so that the elbow's pointing at the hand up at the shoulder height. So on frame 10 I could do the opposite. I could kind of do that. On frame 20, do that. Frame 30, do that. On frame 40, do that. So it just adds a nice shape through the body and counteracts the pelvis a bit. I mean, thinking about it, we could even add this on the pelvis. So if I grab the pelvis controller again, we could, what could we do here? Yeah, so we could kind of rotate like that. On frame 10, rotate the other way. On frame 20, rotate the other way. 30 the other way. And 40 the other way. So we're trying to create a nice curve through the body. And yeah, this is really loosening the character up. It's looking a lot nicer. So it's thinking about things like weight shift, and you know, to make the animation convincing, and also trying to keep things fluid and get away from that wooden look. But I mean, this rig's very forgiving, so I find it really easy to make this look good. Whereas with the Max rig, it's a real effort, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, the only other thing we could do is maybe with the hands, we could do something similar to the feet. So I mean, this hand's coming up and just kind of sliding through the rung. So maybe, I don't know, on frame 8, just 2 frames before it makes contact with the rung, we could kind of rotate that hand up. Let's try that each time the hand goes up. So on 18, the red hand, I could just rotate it back. And on 38, rotate it back, and then grab the blue hand. So on frame 28, just need to pull that hand back. So if we play that back, yeah, the hand's looking a lot better now as well. Really feels like he's grabbing the rungs. And a nice little touch we could add as well is if we grab the knuckles. So if we grab the knuckle controller, I could also, for example, take the curl out on frame 8 for that blue hand. And I could do the same thing on frame 28. Just take that curl value, put it to 0. And yeah, same here. Is that right? Yeah, no, that's that hand done now. So we just do the same thing on the red hand. So grab the knuckles. So on frame 18, take the curl value out to 0. And I think that would be 38 as well. Take that out to 0. So if we play this back, I'll just hide all my controls. There we go. If I play this back, yeah, it really looks like he's grabbing the rungs now. The hands aren't just kind of sliding into the rungs. And that's nice. The feet are stepping up and over onto the rungs. I've got a nice curve through the body. The eyes are going a bit funny, so we see the eyes initially and then they kind of disappear. So I need to have a look at the eye controller. So the eye controller is here, he says, not being able to find it. Okay, let's just go back to frame 1. Okay, here's the eye controller here. So I think it's just going to be a case of animating this. Yeah, so the eye controller just doesn't move. So I think what I'm going to do here is select all these keys here. So 10, 20, 30, and 40 for the eye control. So I'm holding down Shift to select these keys. Then I'm going to go right click and go to delete, get rid of them. So I've just got one keyframe now for this eye controller, which means that I can just move it up here, potentially. A bit like I did with the Neelocat controllers, just to avoid any issues. Yeah, and I think that's sorted it. And yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. I mean, if you wanted to go into any more detail, you could, for example, grab the pelvis controller, the big circle here. You could start looking in the animation editor, in the graph editor, at things like the translate Y. So this would be the up and down movement of the pelvis. So to add a bit more interest on the in-betweens, we could, for example, just shift it up a tiny bit on 5, up on 15. You'll see we've already got these keys down here on the timeline, but we don't have them on this curve. So I think we've only animated on the key poses with this specific curve. So yeah, another one here on 25, just shift it up a bit, and another one on 35. So you can see what's happening here. Basically, these are the keys that are being created. So if I hold down Shift, I can select these. If I shifted these up, I could actually tweak the poses there. This is all it's doing. It's just giving us an even nicer feeling of weight. So it's adding up and down a bit like you'd add on a walk cycle on the in-betweens. And of course, if you thought the character was just constantly too high here, it would just be a case of grabbing all of these keys and shifting them down a tiny bit. And that's a nice way of offsetting the entire animation. So we're offsetting the pelvis movement, pushing it down. We could do a similar thing on the x-axis, on the translate x. We don't have any animation here, but I could just, for example, oops, I tell a lie, that was the wrong one. So it'd be the translate z, sorry. Well, we do have animation. I could take this curve and I could shift it down, which would basically push the pelvis away from the ladder. Or if I push it up, I can bring the pelvis closer to the ladder. So if you need to make big changes to the entire animation, don't do it every single keyframe in the viewport. Do it in your curves. The only other thing to fix here is the knees. The knees look a tiny bit weak, so they're coming out quite a lot. I mean, here the knee is really shooting out here, and to be honest, it could be a case of just going into the graph editor and just pushing this, maybe pushing the body away a tiny bit from the ladder. If that doesn't fix it, the other thing to do is maybe take these knee lookouts and try repositioning them. So maybe they're too low. So maybe if I go back to frame 1, there's a keyframe on 40. So what I might do is just right click on frame 40, delete that keyframe. So I'm just left with one keyframe here on frame 1. And it might be that I just need to shift these controls higher. So just shift those up in the air. Okay, so I think that solved it. Of course, I could animate those values as well. And the other thing to look at is the elbows. If the elbows look a bit weak, they look a bit low, a bit tucked into the character. What we could also do is maybe take we could take the elbow controllers, select both of them, select all of these keys, delete them. So we're left just with one key. It might be just a case of moving these out a tiny bit. So just by moving these out, you're just pulling the elbows out a tiny bit. So what I don't want you guys to do is to just animate this. You know, this is just a demonstration. Use your imagination. Think of something really interesting, like you know, some kind of scenario where the character's trying to get to something, or he's trying to get over an obstacle to get to something behind the obstacle. Try and give the character purpose. He doesn't have to be climbing a ladder. He could be climbing crates of boxes, or it could be a combination of boxes, a ladder. He could be climbing a wall. He could be climbing a net. Anything you want, really. And don't think you have to use IK on the hands for the whole thing. It might be that he can climb up a load of boxes without using his hands, and in that case, you'd want to tween those IK FK sliders for the arms back into FK and start using the FK controls. It could be that you do a bit of both. So he climbs a ladder and then he's clambering up onto a wall, and obviously when he gets to the wall, you need to tween into FK once he's stood on the wall, because he's no longer connected to anything with his hands. Yeah, really just think when you need IK and when you don't. You need it when you're trying to get the character to hold something, or to lean against something, or to push himself off something. But if his arms are free, then you want to be using FK. And yeah, I think if you're a beginner to animation, keep it simple. You know, there's no marks for being ambitious and trying to pull something really difficult off where it all goes wrong. There are only marks for good animation. So if you're new to this stuff, keep it simple. If you've done a lot of animation in the past, then push yourself and try and come up with some really original idea, scenario, and try and do something that's fairly tough. Film yourself, use YouTube reference, use any reference. Don't just sit there and animate in front of a PC, because that's pretty much the worst thing you can do. I mean, that's what I've done here, and you're never going to get further than this really, if that's all you do. Yeah, the only other thing to say is remember the time limit is 5 seconds. So I want a minimum of 5 seconds of animation. I don't really want you to go beyond that because it's all about quality, not quantity. So what have we got here? 40 frames. This isn't quite 2 seconds, just to kind of give you an idea here of where we're at. So we kind of need this plus, yeah, let's say another three and a bit seconds of animation. Don't simply just create a taller ladder and just keep looping and looping this animation. It's not really the idea behind this this animation exercise. This isn't about creating a cycle. I mean, I've used a cycle as a starting point, but I'd want to, moving forward, I'd want to break that up. We've already done the walk cycle. We're moving on to a real piece of animation here. So yeah, come up with a nice scenario and block it out, keep it simple, and then build it up like I've done with the in-betweens. So make sure you're happy with your timing first, and then move on. So get your key poses in, make sure they're strong poses, and then worry about your in-betweens and your weight shift and so on. Okay, I hope you found that useful, and yeah, good luck.